Hello Misfits and welcome. In today's video we are talking about tiers of play. Now tiers of play is hardly a new concept to discuss, but in today's video we are specifically focusing on how that factors into your own campaign planning and the pacing of your story. And as with anything, these are my thoughts and opinions. They might differ from yours. The things I say might work for my table, but they might not work for yours, and that is okay. So just take from this what you like, what is useful to you, and ignore the rest. Okay, so what are tiers of play? Tiers of play is this sort of organization or outline of the different kinds of challenges the party might face at different levels of the game. It's a way to sort of break down your campaign into segments or sort of acts, if you will, of the story, if that makes some amount of sense. And honestly, I think it's a really great way to break down your campaign and better understand what they can handle at different points in the story. And as I said before, it is hardly a new concept. It has existed in many editions of Dungeons and Dragons, and I think it became more useful and more used in more recent editions, but I am not the expert, so don't quote me on that. According to the DMG, there are 4 tiers of play. Tier 1 is levels 1 through 4. Tier 2 is levels 5 through 10. Tier 3 is levels 11 through 16. And Tier 4 is levels 17 to 20. I want to go through each tier and kind of describe sort of the standout aspects of that tier and the kinds of things that they might be dealing with as a party when they are in that sort of segment of the campaign. All right, Tier 1, levels 1 through 4. The DMG refers to this as local heroes. This is where most campaigns start. This is where your party probably meets each other and actually becomes a party. So this is where they are dealing with threats to a small town, a small village, some sort of area that's not as big, not as encompassing. And it's something of that scale. It's probably an isolated threat or event. Now, as the story progresses, that might be an inciting event that is somehow connected to a bigger story, but at least at the start, it seems like a very small, isolated thing. Think of Lost Mines of Phandelver. A lot of us have played that. It's kind of the go-to introduction to 5th edition, and that is solidly all happening within Tier 1, levels 1 through 4. I believe at the end of that adventure, you are supposed to be around level 4 or 5, something like that. So that is solidly within this tier. And this is a great place to start most campaigns. Start small, ease them into just sort of the concepts of your story or your world, and let them kind of figure out who they are and what they want to do. All of my campaigns that I have run have started within this tier, except for maybe one. And it's definitely like a small kind of localized threat, dealing with, a little group of like rogue pirates attacking, an individual, or having to deal with, like cultists or something like that. Dealing with goblins attacking a caravan. Small things, and that's a great place to start. At the start of this tier, people might not know who your players are, who the party is at all, and that is okay, but by the end of this tier, at least to the locals in the area, they are probably recognized or known. They don't necessarily have to have a name for themselves, for their group yet, but at least the locals recognize that, oh yeah, those are the guys that saved us from those goblins, or those are the guys that dealt with those bandits. Just stuff like that. All right, now we go into Tier 2. Tier 2 is levels 5 through 10, and the DMG refers to this as Heroes of the Realm. This is where the party goes from being your local heroes to being recognized maybe throughout the kingdom or something. They are dealing with a larger threat. They are dealing with evil that is attacking, a kingdom itself, a larger city, that kind of scale of region. So this is where your party is probably going to start traveling to further places to deal with these bigger threats. So they've left the local village and now they have moved up in the world and they are dealing with things that are just on a little bit of a grander scale. This is also probably where your party is gonna have a name for themselves, and the people in that kingdom are gonna start recognizing them by their name. I also think tier 2 is where you get a bit of a shift in the story. So like tier 1 is kind of small potatoes, child's play kind of stuff. It's easing you into dealing with threats. When you get into tier 2, you might be facing some battles that you don't win, or you are dealing with, a larger scale enemy, and maybe you're getting a taste of what this big old overarching plot is. Maybe you have an idea of the kind of big evil you're gonna have to deal with at the end of this story. If you went and asked the players at my table where the story, gets bigger, or where things shift and the story gets serious, they would tell you it happens at level 5, which is the start of this tier. So if you went back and watched where my players reach level 5 in their current campaign, crazy stuff happens and it's suddenly a new story. So that's definitely always in the back of my mind when I am plotting out a campaign and I am looking at this tier list. Tier 2 is also where quite a number of Wizards of the Coast campaigns take place within. Some of them will go past it a little bit, but most of them are solidly within this. There are several that end right around level 10. So definitely something to keep in mind. This is kind of like classic D&D, It's a good tier of levels because the party, once they get to level 5, I really feel like they come into their own and they really understand what they are capable of, but they aren't quite like godlike powers yet, so you as a dungeon master can deal with them okay. Once you get past level 10, things get a little complicated for you as a dungeon master because they start to get more reality breaking stuff, but we'll get into that in a second. Tier 2 is also probably where they are making really important connections to allies that are significant within the story. So they're probably making more important friends that might pop up multiple times throughout the campaign or play an important role in the plot of this game you're playing through. So something to keep in mind. Tier 3, this is levels 11 through 16. The DMG refers to this as Masters of the Realm. And this is where your party goes from a group of heroes for a specific kingdom or region to heroes of the entire world. Now the party might be called on to go deal with a threat to a faraway kingdom or deal with an enemy that is planning world domination, that kind of level of stuff. This is the tier where most adventures probably end. Almost all Wizards of the Coast campaigns end within this tier. And yeah, this is where they are unlocking some pretty scary abilities that borderline on that god tier kind of reality bending stuff. So this is going to be really tricky for you as a dungeon master to deal with. So just, be prepared to go with the flow because it's going to happen a lot. And this is also the tier where the party is widely recognized for their achievements. By the end of this tier, people from all around the world have probably heard about them and they are legendary heroes. And it sounds like a tier where campaigns should end, but there is one more tier beyond this, and that is tier 4, which is levels 17 and beyond. And this is what the DMG calls Masters of the World. And I find that naming convention really, really weird because the last tier, they were heroes for the entire world. And now they're still heroes for the entire world. I don't like the name Masters of the World because in its description for this tier, it talks about how now the heroes might be dealing with threats beyond the material plane. So I really don't think this should be Masters of the World. Maybe it should be Masters of the Universe. I don't know. Maybe that's copyrighted, actually. I don't know. But this is the tier where your heroes reach their full potential. And yes, they are still, saving the world and responsible for protecting it, but now they're being called to other planes to deal with threats there. They might be meeting like full-fledged deities, or I don't know, but they are basically gods at this point. And very, very few campaigns even reach this tier of play. Dungeon of the Mad Mage is one, and I think Vecna, Eye of Ruin also is another one. But very, very few do deal with this, because also, when you get to this level, it's just really hard to put anything in the monster manual up against the party and it not be just a cakewalk for the party. And I've sort of talked about that before. I made a video on like why nobody reaches level 20, and a big part of that is just like, it's just, there's nothing to put up against them that they can't defeat. I ran a level 20 one-shot for a group of 7 characters. A group of 7 level 20 characters, and I could have put 2 Tarasques against them and they still would have won and all lived. So yeah, not a lot of stories reach this point, but some stories still do, and you can still have a lot of fun here. Just you need to be prepared as a dungeon master to make a lot of changes. I can't necessarily say for certain if it's been fixed, but at least in the 2014 version of 5th edition, monsters were really tough enough to deal with level 20 characters. The encounter balancing wasn't really set up for this level of gameplay. But it may be fixed now. They've certainly worked really hard to beef up the monsters to counteract just how strong the party is. So it may be fixed. I think only time will tell as we all play through the revision and get more familiar with it. But yes, tier 4, this is mythical levels of renown. They might be known across the planes, certainly throughout the world, and they really are legendary status at this point. So that's tier 4. I know the joke with the DMG is that nobody ever reads it, and that's totally not true. We've all absolutely read the entirety of the Dungeon Master's Guide, 100% definitely. But if you are really only going to read bits and pieces of it, you should definitely read the stuff on Tiers of Play. I will say there is definitely more written for Tiers of Play in the 2014 DMG than the 2024, 2025, whichever year it falls in now, DMG. So I would maybe encourage you to go read the 2014 version, just so there's a little bit more there. And I feel like the 2025 just kind of assumes you've already heard about it and doesn't break it down quite as well. So just something to keep in mind. But this is a really useful section of the book because this 100% factors into how you plan out your campaign. Every single time I am working on a campaign that I am building, I use this as like an outline that I follow. I don't necessarily know everything I want to happen within a campaign, but I will like write out the different tiers and like the different levels included in them, and I will kind of organize what kinds of threats I might want them to face. Okay, tier 1, let's do maybe some bandits, maybe that builds to some sort of cultist thing, and we might throw in kind of a low tier monster in there at the end that's somehow connected to the cultists. Then we get to tier 2 where we're dealing with like threats to the kingdom. Tier 2 is a great tier to introduce maybe a dragon, a young dragon fight. Maybe we have beefier cultists or maybe some spellcasters or something, and we sort of build from there. And then tier 3, we're probably ending the campaign there, so that's where my big bad's gonna go. So I'm looking for a really high level monster in the manual, and I'm going to put that there and kind of flesh out that tier around that. So this definitely informs like how I am structuring my campaign. And also, it's informing how the party is perceived by the public throughout the story. So they don't know who they are in tier 1, and at the start of tier 2, they still don't know who they are. But the end of tier 2, people really know them. People recognize their name and sometimes recognize them on the street, and like throughout tier 3, they are known. So that's something that I need to keep in the back of my head as we are playing through the game, and I need that to be reflected through how NPCs interact with them. Now, that I say that they are known throughout the world by the end of tier 3. Each campaign is different, and depending on the kinds of threats your party is facing in your campaign, that might be true. But it also might not be true. If they're dealing with a very clandestine kind of adventure that's very secretive, or things are happening away from the public eye, they might not be well known, and that's okay. But just from a general standpoint, that's typically how that would go, and then you can change and adjust that depending on the specific needs of your story that you are creating. Looking at this breakdown also helps me keep in my mind the kinds of things the party might have access to, the kinds of allies they might, be collecting along the way. At tier 1, their allies are probably like, I don't know, the shopkeeper or the guy that runs the tavern. But in tier 2, they might meet like the king of the local like kingdom, and that might be a powerful ally or a powerful enemy, and they're meeting these people along the way. And I think that's also very, very important. Who they know can really change their access to certain things. Once they're tier 3, if they are world-renowned heroes, then they might get discounts at magic shops or be given vestiges from, kings and queens from across the land. I don't know. It's however you want to tell the story. But they certainly would have some perks, like, just available to them because of how, well known they are and what they've accomplished, as far as the public is concerned. So that's another thing to keep in mind. I know overall, Tiers of Play is not a new concept and a lot of us know about it, but some of us are still getting into the game for the first time. I mean, heck, with this new revision, I'm sure there will be more people getting into the game that don't know these things. And particularly since that section isn't as fleshed out as it has been in previous versions, I think it's important to make videos like this that cover these topics and kind of help explain things and put them within the context of a campaign that you are playing out. I think if you follow this as you're creating your campaign, it's going to really help you make sure that you're not throwing too much at the party too soon. You don't want to drop a level 1 party, into the throne room and have them become like the heroes of the kingdom, because they're just going to get killed by whatever gets thrown at them because they're level 1. But at the same time, if they're level 4, you don't want to still be throwing hordes of goblins at them unless you have done something significant to make those goblins very different from just a typical goblin stat block. So I think this helps you kind of better visualize, how that would progress throughout the story. And I think this also helps you with your pacing as well. Like, as you are following along and as they are leveling up as the story progresses, you can see that, oh, now we're in the next tier. Now we can sort of make a shift, and now we're less local heroes, more heroes of the realm. Less heroes of the realm, more masters of the realm. I think keeping track of how they are kind of moving up in the world as they progress through these tiers of play is really important, and I think that will sort of help your story feel cohesive, feel well-paced, and feel like you know, the kinds of stories you would read in a book, or the kinds of stories you watch in like Critical Role and things like that. And can you go outside of this breakdown? Can you sort of branch out and do something different than this? Of course you can. This is just sort of a guide. This is to help you get started and to help you build that sort of skeleton structure of what your campaign can be. And then if you want to make adjustments or change this, you can. That's well within your rights as a dungeon master. But yeah, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found it useful. It's a topic that I always have enjoyed, and I really have always loved this section of the DMG. And I know it's not like a new thing, but I wanted to talk about it, so I hope that's okay. But yeah, if you liked this, if you want to support the channel, want to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. That stuff always helps me out. But way more importantly, leave a comment down below. The engagement on these videos really helps people find the channel, and that's always a good thing. But with all of that said and done, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, a great rest of your week, and I'll see you again next time. Again, very sorry that I have been away. I have hated not being able to make videos, but I'm just too busy. And then I got sick there for a little bit, and so that did not help at all. But next week is my spring break. So the school that I teach at, that's when we get off. So I'm hoping I can use that time wisely to, one, rest, and two, get on top of some things that I've wanted to do. I definitely have plenty of other videos I want to make. I've thought out some other skits to film with multiple versions of me, so hopefully you guys will see some of that in the not too distant future. But yeah, we're just making it through. It's hard to balance everything, you know, all at the same time. So I'm doing my best, and I appreciate all of y'all being so nice and supportive. That stuff means a lot to me. Anyway, have a good day, guys.